Hello, my name is Richard Medcalf, founder of Xquadrant. I coach some of the world's top executives and management teams, helping them achieve bigger and more meaningful results than ever before. In this season, I'm speaking with C-suite leaders from around the globe to find out what the COVID-19 pandemic has taught them and what wisdom they have to share for other leaders. Welcome to Leadership Lessons for Challenging Times. Today I speak with Michel Emelianoff. Michel is a very experienced French CEO. He's led huge organizations in the past, and right now he is running a healthcare tech-driven scale-up company. And he's really an expert in medical technology, and so has had to pivot his business very dramatically during this COVID period of 2020. His existing customers have totally stopped buying future-focused healthcare tech products and really focused on the very urgent requirements of the pandemic. And so what you hear in this interview with Michel is really a fascinating insight into what is going on at this intersection of medicine, technology, COVID, and business, and what business leaders need to think about. We get into the big challenges he's seeing as we move into this long period of just managing ongoing COVID issues, health issues, people being diagnosed, people being testing and having to isolate, and the impact that has on the workplace. We get into thinking about how business can safeguard employee health without destroying productivity. We get into how you can create levers to create a good environment for your employees in this context. So what can you do? How do you actually manage these very real disruptions to your business and take care of your employees and keep them healthy? And then we take a step back and we think about what are the changes that we should be expecting in the coming years as medical technology takes on a new role for businesses. So enjoy this conversation that I had with Michel Emelianoff. Hi, Michel.
Good morning, Richard.
Hi, good to see you.
Same here.
Well, hey, it's great to have you here. Why don't we just dive straight in, and perhaps for people who don't know you or don't know Visiomed, if you can just give us 1 minute of kind of elevator pitch, right? Who are you and what does Visiomed do?
Okay, well, I'm Michel Emelianoff, and I'm the CEO of the Visiomed Group, which is a listed company focused on the healthcare domain and more specifically telemedicine. So what we do is we build solutions, telemedicine solutions for healthcare professionals, for mobility cases, as well as fixed healthcare points.
Got it. So obviously you're right in the middle of, in healthcare, right in the middle of it this year with COVID. And I know we've been chatting in the past, and I thought it was really interesting what you were sharing as we moved from that initial kind of crisis mode, right, where everybody was just kind of trying to get through lockdown, the original lockdown, and now we're into this longer, more drawn out and quite challenging time, right, where energy levels are down and people are struggling. And I think when I was talking with you, you've really seen very close up some of those challenges. So I'd just love to understand, Michel, what are the big challenges that you're seeing businesses face now that we're kind of in this COVID world and it's continuing? What's the impact that you're seeing on, for CEOs?
I think the challenges are twofold. There is a business challenge and there is a human challenge. From a business standpoint, clearly the challenge is how do we get back to operating as close as possible to normality while not being normal at all, as we're facing a situation where at any moment we can have a case of a colleague that is showing symptoms and potentially has the COVID, and we need to take actions, sending people back home, pushing them to do a bunch of tests and so on and so forth. So the business challenge is how am I going to impact how am I going to handle the impact on my capacity to operate? So how do I organize myself to cope with that relatively volatile situation? And the second one is the challenge of the responsibility of enterprises in France in particular, where we have obligation of results in terms of health and not means, meaning that you have to do everything in your power to guarantee that you're protecting your colleagues and your employees. So that's the business challenge. And the second one is the human challenge, which for me is even more important, which is that the current protocol that we're all following according to the guidelines of the government is actually generating a lot of anxiety amongst the people working within a company. Why that? Because it's one thing to say everybody's going to stay home so that we all get protected from the COVID. It's a very different situation to say, okay, you guys, you've been in contact with that particular person who has eventually the COVID, so we're all going to send you back home, and not to protect you, but because we think potentially you've been contaminated, and we don't want you guys to contaminate the rest of us. And that's very difficult for people because it generates a lot of questions on how they will handle this with their family and relatives.
Right. So what you're saying is that in the original lockdown, we were all staying at home kind of to protect ourselves. But now what's happening is you got suddenly people are told they need to leave, right, and go back for 2 weeks or whatever to their own homes. That's creating two impacts. On the business side, operations are impacted. Suddenly you've not got that person, right, unnecessarily. On the other side, they've basically just been told that they're likely contaminating influence, right? They might have COVID, they don't see any symptoms, but now do they even stay in the same room as their family, right?
Yep. Do they visit their parents or grandparents? What do they do if they have small kids? What do they do if their spouse is pregnant and about to deliver? I mean, I personally faced within the company these questions, and I can tell you the level of anxiety that people are showing is extremely important. Even more when we look at the time it takes for them to get an answer to whether or not they have been contaminated. Because today, if you follow the protocol for the PCR test, first off, you need to wait 5 days till the last day of the contact with the person that potentially was contaminating you to do the test. And then if you look at the reality today is you wait between 5 to 10 days to get the test results. So that means during 14 days, you have no clue whether you have it or not. And you have to try to cope with that situation and try to find a solution to protect your relatives.
Yeah, that's hard, right? So what's been your guidelines, right, or your playbook as you try to wrestle with this situation? I mean, there's these two sides you mentioned, right? There's operations and responsibility, and then there's the kind of personal side. Let's start perhaps with operations, right? How do you juggle safeguarding employee health on one hand with productivity on the other, right? What have been the issues that you've seen, and how have you tried to find a way through in this time?
I think the most important thing is to try to, as fast as possible, identify who are the individuals that are potentially at risk, and effectively make sure that they're taking the right steps to either be treated or be put somewhere where they can't contaminate anybody else, and make sure that the ones that are not showing any problems can continue to live their lives relatively normally and work relatively normally. And there is a big debate in France today, but the reality is you have plenty of rapid tests that exist. Ones that are rapid PCR, if you may, that are enabling you to detect early contamination within 10 minutes. They're not as precise as the PCR that we know where you have to go to a lab, but they give you a pretty good indication. And then you have blood tests also that you can use rather later in the cycle of COVID to try to figure out whether people have generated the antibodies allowing to manage the comeback of people.
Right.
So what we have done and what we are encouraging other companies to do is to proactively, use these rapid tests that can be done in a pharmacy or can be done by your nurse, so that within 10 minutes, you get a picture. You get a
Got it.
picture of who is positive, and you need to confirm that with the real PCR, and it's going to take some time, but you need to be quarantined, and who is not positive. And in that case, no panic, no anxiety. Let's continue to work properly with all the protections that are obviously necessary within the enterprise. So for me, the big thing is, how do you make this anxiety and not knowing go away as fast as possible using those rapid tests, and then you take the right measures. Stay at home if there is a risk. Continue to work, whether remotely or in the office, depending upon the operating model that you have decided to implement, if effectively there is no problem.
Yeah, I got it. So yeah, it's really trying to get data right as quickly as possible, even if it's not the most reliable data. It's getting the whatever 80-20 rule, right? Getting enough data to be able to make the best decision that we can at that stage, right? Rather than kind of going into this limbo and not deciding for a long period of time, right? Which
and we've seen the protocol from the government evolve. If you go back, 4 weeks ago, it was PCR über alles. There is only one test that exists in the world and that we trust. Now today, they are accepting the other tests that have been in use by some of our neighbors in Germany, for example, and where clearly they are managing the situation better than we are doing. So I think it is time, that we accept that those tools are available. They're good enough to be able to make decisions and put CEOs in a position where effectively, they can show that they've done everything possible to maximize the safety of their employees and the health of their employees.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Michel, what about as CEO of Visiomed, when you look at the employees, right, and what they're doing, how are you creating that productive environment that you talked about, right? What have been the issues that you've had to work through there, right? Because everything's changed, right? The way we've had to work and working from home, coming back into the office. What are the challenges in that, and what have some of the approaches that you've used?
So I think we faced a particular situation because we made a decision that we considered it was a smart decision in February, which was to move the company from one location to the other, and that move was planned mid-May.
Okay, you did a physical office move right in the middle of lockdown.
Absolutely. So, which happened to be a disaster, because obviously nothing was normal and we couldn't move forward with all the prep work and so on and so forth. So we ended up not having an office between literally mid-May till mid-July, and that on top of the confinement that was imposed to everyone. So we had, literally 5 months of lockdown and people working from home. And we have seen that for our company, that was creating a lot of problems. Problems because some jobs just can't be done from home. Others can be done from home, but when you are within a relatively small company where you need a lot of collaboration, interaction in real time, because things are moving extremely rapidly, not being able to be in the same physical room to do some whiteboarding exercise is quite difficult. And I understand there are a lot of tools that exist today where we can use that, but it's not the same. It impacts the efficiency. And then finally, and that was something that I had not necessarily realized at the beginning, but literally 50% of the employees that we have can't work from home under good conditions. And these people really suffered during that period of 5 months, having to work from a place which is, not meant to be an office with kids running around, or old parents and so on and so forth, not having the ability to have a quiet room where they can actually go and work. So clearly we've decided as soon as we could to change the model and bring as much as possible people back into the office with all the measures to protect themselves, masks, obviously, gels, and so on and so forth, and distances between the different workspaces. The proactive testing as well that we have implemented. So each time we have a doubt, we do that with the rapid test that allows us to react pretty quickly and not have people go into panic mode. So there is no one size fits all as far as the operating model is concerned. There are a lot of different elements to be taken into account, and the one that really needs to be paid attention to is under what conditions can people really work from home? Is that feasible? Is that acceptable for them, or is it very difficult?
I think it's a great point, because the lived experience of a leader, a CEO, might not at all be the lived experience of their employees, right? And as you said, either because, well, obviously perhaps different social levels, income levels, accommodation, even just where they live, right? I mean, you've perhaps got employees in a relatively narrow geographic area, but obviously some people have got employees around the world, and who knows, right, what the lived experience is if somebody 2 levels down in the organization in some other country, right? It can be so different. And it's easy to imagine, well, I get to work from home and I've got my huge monitor and quiet space and headset or whatever it is. Not everybody has that, and it can be extremely difficult. And some people are isolated, some people are overcrowded. It's very different for people.
I can tell you, we had a couple of people going into depression during that period, because it was very, very difficult for them.
Yeah. And so, Michel, how have you had to show up as a leader, right? What's been that learning edge for you, that growth edge in this? Who have you had to be in this time to balance the company and lead your employees?
I think for us, it was a very challenging time on 2 fronts. One, literally, and I think this was probably the same for most of the companies, but our business stopped, literally stopped. We were selling telemedicine solutions to healthcare professionals, and literally these guys went into the plan blanc, and everything that was outside of the ordinary wasn't really a topic of for discussion. Right. Revisiting the way they work and so on and so forth to improve processes was not a priority. And really what they wanted were masks, gels, and whatever other protection equipment. Yeah. So literally the business stopped, and we had to react very, very quickly to try to continue to have some level of activity to pay the salaries of our employees. The good news is, being in that healthcare sector with a lot of suppliers in that domain, we were able to source the type of equipment that healthcare professionals wanted. But we had to adapt, and I had to adapt to a business that was completely different than our core business, and try to manage on a real-time basis, reinventing a distribution business or retail business, if you wish, that for which we had absolutely zero process and zero structure to handle, and do that with people working remotely in the very difficult environment that we face. So it was a lot of time communicating again and again with the different individuals, making sure that we were in contact almost all the time, because of all those very quick decisions that we needed to make. So very different way of working for me, very different way of trying to inject energy. Not that easy to inject energy remotely, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Especially when people are, facing a situation for which they're not accustomed, for which there is not a, process that they know and they master.
Absolutely.
So that was kind of the challenge for me.
Mm. Yeah, that's yeah, amazing, right? You had to totally build a new line of products in the middle of that, in that situation, um, which is yeah, incredible. I mean, what would your, if you could write yourself a note, like go back in time and tell your past self, like some lessons for this period, like what would you tell them, right? How would you kind of pre-warn them, or what would you encourage them to do perhaps differently, or pay more attention to if you're having to do it again?
I would really try to pay attention to the accommodations that people live in and whether they are fit for home working or not. Because even if it's for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, if it's impossible for these people and it's going to put them under a lot of stress because they just can't be on the phone with 5 kids running around, there is no point of having them continue to work.
Hmm.
And I would have probably made some different decisions and asked some people to stop working as opposed to try to continue in that very difficult environment. So try to proactively identify
Hmm.
these individuals that are going to be facing difficulties and say,
Hmm.
okay, don't work. The second one was try to redefine the rule of the games and the rules of engagement um, uh, more proactively as well. I mean, the rules of engagement
Hmm.
between the team workers, because we had to reinvent everything, which means a lot of frustration for a lot of people. So you have to be super careful in the way you communicate to one another, because
Hmm.
everybody is under a lot of stress, everybody is under a lot of frustration, and if you don't pay attention, you can create a lot of tension between individuals. So try to reset the rules of communications, the rules of engagement, and try to make sure everybody's super careful in the way they communicate.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? When everything shifts, you need to come up with new rules, right? And yeah, and a new framework in which to operate, because communication is not the same, and pressures are not the same. So I think it's a great point. Hey, Michelle, I know time's moving on, but I can't let you go without just asking for your perspectives, right, on the future, because um, Visiomed, your telemedicine technology, healthcare technology. I know COVID's kind of taken everybody by surprise, and like the big focus this year, obviously, and it's keeping going. But if you look more broadly, um, what are the shifts that are going on that business leaders, everybody, right, should be knowing about? I mean, what are you seeing as the big shifts in healthcare, right, that are going to be structural for people in the next couple
Yeah.
of years?
So, I think pre-COVID, it was pretty obvious. I mean, we were all having these issues in France with doctors in the ERs complaining about the volume of people and so on and so forth. So globally, there is an issue of not enough healthcare professionals available where patients are located.
Mm.
That was obvious pre-COVID, but has been super obvious during COVID, which has emphasized the problem. I think what it has showed as well is a couple of interesting things. It has shown that you can do things remotely, and every doctor has started to do teleconsultation using Skype or other means,
Hmm.
because they didn't have another option, and they had to realize that effectively it is possible to have a
Yeah.
conversation with a patient and cover a certain set of pathologies remotely. It has also shown that the vast majority of the problems you can't really handle if they're not measures of certain parameters or ability um, um, to look at certain parts of the body of the person that you're trying to consult, and that effectively, when you can combine this ability to access remotely to a doctor with a minimum number of measures of critical medical data, you can actually cover 80% of the pathologies that we see. The other ones needs to go to emergency care. So I think the net is that I think this crisis has shown that effectively leveraging connected medical devices combined with teleconsultation platforms, you can actually heavily contribute to address the issue of access to healthcare in countries like France. And so what I'm expecting in the years to come is that we're going to see the adoption of that type of technology, whether in mobility cases, i.e. emergency care, firefighters, and so on and so forth, but also in home care with nurses visiting patients who will have the ability to connect to a doctor that is remote to do a consultation with a patient without having to move the patient. You'll have also, I think, the development of healthcare or point of care that are fixed location closer to companies, in particular in areas where the companies do not have any healthcare professionals. You know that in France, below 500 employees within a site, you don't have to have a nurse or a healthcare professional. So the vast majority of sites do not have anyone to take care of the people. And you will see in the future the deployment of those point of care in those areas that will offer a solution of proximity to employees to go and consult without having to take days off because they need to make an appointment with their doctor. So my expectation is to see a lot of those solutions being deployed that will allow people not to have to wait multiple days to get an appointment to a doctor, and be able to access these resources relatively easily.
Yeah, that's great. So I think often we think about the communications aspect, right, of teleconsultations. But I think your point is that there's the communications platform and then there's the data platform, right? There's making sure you have both that come together at that moment so that the physician has got something to go off, right? Rather than just the screen, which is clear, right? And it's important, but bringing those two together hasn't really happened
critical.
at this stage. Yeah,
absolutely.
Perfect. Well, great. Well, Michel, it's been great speaking with you. If people are interested in knowing a bit more about you, about Visiomed, where do they go?
They can go at visiomed.fr, which is our website, or they can also send me an email at Memelianoff, MEMELIANOFF, at visiomedlab.fr.
Perfect. Well, I'll put that in the show notes. Michel, it's been great speaking to you. Thank you for sharing a little bit of your insider track on what's really going on, managing employees and managing a business as COVID drags on. So it's been great to speak with you today.
Was my pleasure. Thank you so much, Richard. Have a good one.
Many thanks. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Now let's turn to you. If you're a top performer who's already accomplished great things and yet knows that there's a whole new level of impact and potential open to you, then why don't we get on the phone and strategize on how to get you there? Head over to xquadrant.com/speak to find out more. Until next time, be bold and be purposeful.